So what we're talking about here is AI is introducing a fundamental transformational change. And one of the things that happens with that is that it's an emergent issue. And so you can't fully predict exactly how things will go.
Welcome to the Coaching Revealed podcast series. I'm one of your hosts, Austin Matzelle. In this episode of Coaching Revealed, I'm joined by fellow podcast host, Terrani, as we interview executive coaches Patrick Reilly and Wai Poc to explore the intersection of coaching, leadership, and artificial intelligence. Patrick and Wai share insights from their work with top organizations, including Google, Cisco, Meta, and the Federal Reserve Bank, where AI is rapidly transforming leadership and company cultures. They discuss how leaders can develop strategic foresight, address AI-related fears, and cultivate the emotional intelligence necessary to guide teams through technological change. The conversation also covers key AI trends and impact, such as the rise of large language models, also known as LLMs, and AI agents, and how these tools are reshaping decision-making at the executive and team levels. For coaches, Patrick and Wai encourage experimentation with AI-empowered tools, along with a mindset of upskilling and continuous learning. With AI integration varying across industries, the guests explore how different organizations, from tech giants to small businesses, are adapting and what this means for leadership coaching. Patrick and Wai emphasize the critical balance between human intuition and AI-generated insights, positioning coaching as an essential bridge between technological advancement and effective leadership. Thank you for tuning into Coaching Revealed. Let's get started.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into Coaching Revealed. We are so excited to be interviewing Patrick Reilly and Wai Poc today. Patrick has been coaching executives for 25 plus years, helping them to become impactful leaders who inspire followership. He specializes in working with clients who need a senior thought partner to help them develop the thinking and behaviors needed in becoming a compelling leader. His passions include supporting leaders to develop their executive presence and their ability to create impact. His unique ability to help leaders navigate their organizational culture and politics while building trust has been instrumental in his coaching of successful leaders. Patrick specializes in tech and healthcare, and some of his key clients include Google, Cisco, KP, and Grail Bio. Wai Poc is an executive coach with 20 plus years of leadership experience from Fortune 500 companies to C-levels at startups. For the last about 10 years of executive coaching, Wai has specialized in being a sounding board to help his clients to build strategic relationships. Wai's sector of expertise are high tech and biotech. He loves engineers, technologists, scientific, medical, and operational, and all those in G&A functions due to having coached out of Stanford's Graduate School of Business. Some of Wai's key clients include Google, Meta, the Federal Reserve Bank, Genentech, and LinkedIn. So Patrick and Wai, thank you for being here today. I'd love to dive in and find out what drove each of you to be working at the intersection of both coaching and technology.
You know, Patrick and I actually met at Google back in, I want to say like 2015, 2016, sometime around that frame. And I've just been a big fan of Patrick's for a long time. I almost consider him kind of like a running buddy, so to speak, in the coaching world. So we're both very thrilled to be here speaking with the Institute of Coaching. And Emily, to answer your question, it's our contention that all leaders will be transformed by AI, and some will be called upon to lead AI. Our experience that we're bringing is in having coached leaders who are at the helm of those transformations of AI in their organizations. That's where technology and coaching come together.
That's awesome. Yeah, this is such an important topic. So really excited to have you both here today.
Absolutely. I'm interested for both of you, having worked together for a while, as you think about this intersection of coaching and technology, and specifically for the leaders that you're working with. At this current stage, we're in 2025 and there's a lot of technological advancements currently coming out. What are some of the things that you big picture find to be important and interesting for coaches and leaders to know about the impacts of AI on leadership?
Well, the first thing I think, Austin, is to remember that really the focus here is AI. It's in our experience, it supersedes all other technological interventions at this point in time, because it really is a game changer. The phrase that we like to use is it's two things that are happening. One, it's happening at Mach speed. So it is happening at a speed that's way faster than we've experienced before. So that changes the game. Also, I have learned personally from working with a number of AI experts have to be really attentive to the risk involved. And you have to be really thoughtful about that, have the right processes in place, have the right leaders in place, because things can go wrong when you're changing this much that fast. And the last thing I want to say that I think is really significant, and something Wai and I have both learned, is that the biggest issue for leaders is figuring out ways to facilitate and generate acceptance of AI. What do you do to set it up so that people learn, people get comfortable with what's going on, and figure out what they have to do? If you don't generate acceptance, you can't have effective change in the organization. And in order to deal with AI, you have to have effective change in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Why, anything you'd want to add to this more general question?
One observation is that this is a time when some experts are kind of having that feeling of being non-experts. And what I mean by that is can have a lot of background in technology or in the application of technology if you're on the business side. But all of that is coming to the floor in the introduction of AI. It's becoming something where we're all having to learn at different levels of all different levels of the organization. So we're all in this learning journey together.
Thanks. That's really helpful. Mm-hmm. There's so much chatter about AI, but I'm not sure if everybody necessarily knows exactly what is AI, what are the emerging trends. So it'd be great if you could talk and touch on that.
Yeah, I am not an engineer myself, a computer scientist. And so I sometimes like to think about the big ideas behind AI, which actually has been along for some time, but it really took a change in 2017. And I won't go into the specifics of that because that's so technical. What has emerged in the early, about 2023 is LLMs, and more recently, agents. LLMs are large language models. I like to think of them as a big library. And it's almost like now we have that big library. And in the past, we have to make a big trek. And then you have a big library. And then you have to figure out where I'm going to go in order to get what I need, let alone analyze all of that collection of knowledge, or as the computer scientists like to call it, data. We've got the big library. Now it's accessible to us at our fingertips. More currently, the development is of agents. So I like to think of agents as almost like having a research scientist, a PhD level researcher who's available to you. And you can say to that person, hey, go and find me X, Y, and Z. Prompt them is the verb that we talk about. All of us are graduates of colleges. And if so, just because you're a college graduate doesn't mean that you know what to do coming into your first actual real world job. The reason why I bring that up is because the future is really about LLMs plus agents plus you. Because oftentimes it needs an experienced set of eyes to look at what is being, the output of what is being received, to give it an overview and say, yeah, this is what we need, or change it by about 20%. That future is this library, it's this researcher, that's our future, it's these LLMs, it's these agents, and it's you. It's us.
I think there's 3 key points. One is you have to learn what agents and LLMs are. Then you have to actually figure out how to work with them. And here's the other thing, Wai said this, and I've learned this from lots and lots of engineers over time. You might go to a really fabulous school and you finish and you graduate and you get your engineering degree and you have a lot of knowledge, but you have no wisdom. And to be effective in the world of artificial intelligence, you actually need to move from knowledge to wisdom to be effective. So that's a big challenge. It's a transformational challenge that we all have to go through.
Yeah, and as coaches, what would you say are the most important things in this space, especially if someone's coaching and not really well-versed in technology in general, let alone AI? So what would you put a light on of you should learn these things first? This would be most effective.
The first step as coaches is to begin playing with this. And so, and I'm not necessarily going to advocate any specific LLM as much as there are some different ones. ChatGPT has gotten a lot of notice. Gemini is Google's product, but there's Perplexity, there is Anthropic's Claude. So there's quite a number that is out there that uses natural language processing. There's a few that are for those who work with images. So Sora, Midjourney. The first step is to play with this. Here's a specific example. You might be, let's say, having to deal with a client who is raising some concerns about the imposter syndrome. Put that in as if it was a search query. Then you have another prompt, which is, how does this show up? It's imposter syndrome, but Now we're talking about in the technical world for mid-career woman. What if it's a person of color who is 8 years out from their MBA program and now has their first finance job? You can see how that prompting is getting more specific. And then the output from these LLMs actually will become more useful to you. So as a coach, use these LLMs as an assistant to you to get things faster.
That's really helpful.
If I could add one more thing, to me, it's similar to my attempt, I'll say, to learn 2 foreign languages by immersing myself in the culture. And I think it's a lot like you have to, as Wai was saying, you have to play, you have to practice. And really the painful part is you have to be willing to make a lot of mistakes, pick yourself back up off the floor and keep going. That's the MO for this.
Growth mindset.
I think the inundation into the technology to understand it is really, really crucial in terms of getting to be in a space where you're able to comfortably work with your clients or comfortably understand the ecosystem as it's changing so much. I'm wondering, for coaches, as they are interacting with artificial intelligence, but they're also working with clients who are now using these tools, what are some of the differences between the different types of organizations that coaches might be integrating with, whether that's a larger organization or a smaller mom and pop or a big tech firm? How do those different companies interact with technology right now that you're seeing?
I'll try to keep that fairly simple. There's really lots of more definition available and specificity, but let's just look at 3 sort of places. One is you're looking at big tech companies, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, etc. What they're doing is they are developing for themselves and for customers the technologies that will carry us forward. It's the mothership for them, both in terms of processing information internally and also making it available to users or clients. It's a core competency, it's a core technology of the company. Then you go to other large companies. The ones I can think of off the top of my head are a couple of big retailers like Walmart, Home Depot. It's a big business. They cover a lot of territory, but that's not their core business. You're buying things for them to take care of your home, or you're buying food products or repair tools and such like that. And what's important there is they do have to have a core group of people inside the organization who really understand artificial intelligence and create the right way to have it available to the people in the company. But it's not a core competency, but it's an essential, what I've come to learn is a sort of core support technology or tool set. It's a different thing. And then finally, you get to smaller organizations who also will need to have it, or many of them will have to have it. A small coffee shop or chain in New York City will have to have it available to be in contact with clients and prospects, to purchase product and such like that. Other small people. There's also sort of another thing, kind of tiny teams emerging in Silicon Valley now, where in startups, what they're doing is they're using AI, and in some cases, they're using it to replace some of the infrastructure pieces in startups, such as HR people, IT people, et cetera, finance people. So those are the 3 sort of main classifications. And I think how you approach it and what the coaches do in each of those different domains will vary based on the sort of the core businesses of those organizations.
When it's coming to working within these different organizations, one of the things that you mentioned earlier is, Patrick, the wisdom that individuals may need to interact with the technology. And I'm curious, what types of wisdoms do you see at a smaller organizational level or the larger level? What is effective for leaders right now if they're working with a team of 5 versus a team of 500?
Well, I'm going to give you an answer that comes from my initial coaching mentor, which is it depends, right? It depends on the business of the organization and the business challenge of the organization. I think I'll keep it simple at that level. So clearly, if you're looking at a Microsoft or Google, they're global companies that are dealing with global issues that have different rules and regulations in different places, and they have literally billions of users. So that's a very large scale problem. If I run, and I don't remember that, I just saw it, there's some really kind of cool mom and pop coffee shop in New York, and it's not just one, there's a number of them. They're really fun, they're friendly, but in order to make economical purchases across the 5 or 10 stores, they have to have enough people who know enough how to do it, how to use it to be efficient and effective. So it's, to a great extent, it's around the business challenges you have and the scale of your organization or the size and scale of your organization?
I would add to that. I think when you're a big company, you're beginning to think, just take one department, marketing. Marketing actually has been, I would say, quite along on this journey because they've had to use predictive analytics to figure out what people will buy, what they're interested in for some time now. But in addition, there's a creative aspect of marketing work. If you think about the arts aspect of it, as well as sound, so jingles that we hear on a commercial, for example, or viewing an advertisement from a billboard to TikTok. And so, whereas in the past, you have lots of people internally, and then they might have contracted organizations, vendors that they use to generate these campaigns. Now you could have like one image and with a few clicks, be able to get like, let's say 30 or 300 or 3,000 representations. And then someone with the wisdom of kind of an experienced eyes looking at, you know what, this is what we want, this is not what we want. All of that, you don't need nearly as many people in order to discern. So that organization is going to look very different in a large organization. Different than that is a small organization, which maybe in the past says, hey, we don't have the budget to go out with a big advertiser and engage them. And actually now at their fingertip is Sora and Midjourney for them to play around. And so the world is transformed, whether you're in big company or whether you are in that small mom and pop startup.
I just want to highlight one word from what Wai said, and that is transformation. This is really a transformation. And if you think about it, I always come back to, if you take an egg and you crack the shell and you're going to put it in the pan and make scrambled eggs or sunny side up, you're no longer in the business of a hard-boiled egg. So what we're talking about here is AI is introducing a fundamental transformational change. And one of the things that happens with that is that it's an emergent issue. And so you can't fully predict exactly how things will go. What Wai just said is really pretty good, and it will not be fully accurate because we can't see the future that well. We don't know exactly how correct he's going to be. But for right now, he's doing a pretty good job.
We're all going to have to be on our journey of learning. We'll say it like that. Since we have an audience of coaches.
Ready to advance your coaching practice? Join the Institute of Coaching and tap into the world's leading resource for coaching science and professional development. With over 4,000 members across 130 countries, the IOC offers invaluable networking opportunities with an elite global coaching community and innovative learning to broaden your knowledge and keep you at the forefront of coaching best practices. Engage in cutting-edge learning events with world-renowned coaching scholars, from webinars and seminars to discussion groups, research projects, and more. Try any membership free for 30 days. Use promo code IOC Podcast and visit instituteofcoaching.org/join to get started. Definitely. I think this segues into what I've been thinking about too, which is what are the organizational challenges that are coming up related to AI? And this could be things that AI is addressing to solve for businesses, or maybe new issues that are coming up that they have to adapt to in this transformation. So can you speak to that a bit?
Let me say this. This is not textbook learning that I'm speaking from here at all. This is like in the trenches from some folks I personally have coached and worked through, where they've been asked to come in and really ramp up the artificial intelligence capabilities in the organization. And what I've learned again and again is there's three main areas of focus. And think about this. You go from technology to AI, and it's not at all like any technology you know before. It's so different. So one, businesses are run by having a business strategy, goals, objectives, figuring out what the market is, who are the customers, now who are the customers going to be. Number one, you have to create a whole different business strategy, a different way to spend your money, a different way to reach out to customers. That's the first piece. The second wicked problem, and wicked problems are things that engineers encounter all the time, you have to deal with the culture. Culture is mainly about the habits and norms in an organization, the behaviors that people display. This requires people to change the culture, to change habits. And as everybody knows, old habits are hard to break, especially for people who've been successful, because we've developed patterns in our brain for what to do that works. And what you're doing is you're reprogramming your brain for their different kinds of habits. So that's the second piece. And the third piece, and Wai's touched on that a little bit in some of his comments, is it's very different kind of talent that's needed. You need to develop or acquire to do the AI technical work. People who are extremely competent engineers in software development may not be good AI folks. And a lot of that has to do with a lot of the learning and the development of the technology, specifically over about the last 8 years or so. So you're having to bring in people who are newer, who have a different skill set. And then there's a whole other bevy of problems that comes around because you need the technical acumen, the expertise that's different. But then you also, in order to make AI work, there's a whole bevy of organizational changes. The people who are leading AI have to be experts in organizational change. They have to learn how to do that or bring it into the organization. They also have to be experts in negotiation, influence, executive communication. As Wai will tell you, one of his favorite words in English is 2 letters. It's called EQ. He loves EQ, and for good reason. And that you have to have people who have EQ because you have to go back to what I said earlier. If you get people, you have to get people to accept what this is, what the change is. And sometimes that requires you to be different and to manage your emotions and your thinking in very different ways. So you are effectively influencing a whole variety of people who have very different agendas and experiences. So that's a lot of stuff to ask of any individual leader. It is doable. It's possible. It ain't easy.
Why for you, Patrick kind of mentioned that interest in EQ. And so I'm interested when you're looking at all of these organizational challenges. I'm assuming EQ is one of the leadership competencies that's helpful for navigating AI-driven change. But from your vantage point, what are things that leadership should be developing to address AI-driven change?
Yeah, good follow-up question, Austin. And Patrick hinted at this somewhat, but I'll speak about it in this way. As coaches, we are guiding our client leaders around change. What's different about AI is really the scale of the change and the speed of the change. Sometimes Patrick and I have talked about it as it's a tidal wave, and it's coming at Mach speed. So what does that look like, and how does that unfold in an organization, and where does EQ then come into the play? Typically, organizations have some strategic direction. And here, what it means is, okay, we need to reel that sizably back and then redirect that. And redirect that in what ways? We may, and again, Patrick alluded to this a little bit, we can't entirely predict beyond 3 years, or in some sectors, beyond 1 year. But yet we know we need to reel it back. We know we need to redirect. We need to experiment, pilot in various ways in organizations. So for our client leaders, when they're needing to do that, typically the other complexity with AI is it's drawing people who maybe are very technical. And let's say 8 years out of a PhD program in computer sciences, and then pairing them, if the organization is even big enough, with an SVP who's on the business side and saying, we need to make these changes, we need to experiment in these ways. And just imagine a young person with less wisdom needing to figure out, whoa, how do I influence this whole set of leaders who are already invested in one direction, and then redirecting them and saying, hey, this is a risky thing, but we need to go here. How do they get about getting that power and influence? And they need that EQ in order to do that. But yet they're super technical. It's not where they have spent their time and energy. And so this is where some of the organizations Patrick and I are engaged in, they have bolted us. When I say bolt, B-O-L-T, bolted us with some of these leaders in order for them to affect this kind of change. I would say that is quite different. Applying that EQ with very technical people, helping them navigate the kinds of politics that typically people with maybe 20 plus years of experience know well, have the wisdom and experience to do.
So when you're working with a client kind of in this environment as a coach, developing an EQ in a very technical space, what are some of the tips or tricks that you've done as a coach that you found to be effective within this niche, I would say, within coaching?
Well, in that, so I work with a lot of technical people, both in high tech, and actually my background, I spent 10 years in biotech. And then I coach out of Stanford, the business school, like their CFO programs. So the finance people are also very technical. What I find with the very technical people is that they're very logical. Problem is dealing with people are not always logical. There's other things that are driving their behavior. So helping them, giving them kind of a framework about some of those other motivators that people have can be very helpful, whatever model that you might choose. I myself, for example, really love people's styles at work. There's strength finders that also show, like, here are some different ways that people's style, but different than that are what people value, like the SCARF model, for example. So these are things that certainly coaches are very familiar with. So those, to me, all come into play when you're trying to figure out people and figuring out what people's agendas are. This gets into the politics side and where agendas meet. So for that, I use a lot of Getting DS material. So because that's all about negotiation and what are people's positions versus their interests, and then co-creating together. So these are all applications that certainly we offer to our client leaders. Working with technical people, having those kinds of models, I have found to be very helpful. Models don't tell all. They're just a representation of the world, real world phenomena. Real world phenomena are much more complex than that, but it's a beginning point. And it's something that they can hang on. So I have found that to be very useful with the leaders that I work with.
One thing, Wai and I both were, I'll say, students of David Peterson, who had been the head of coaching at Google for a long time. And a fairly simple construct or model that seems to work really well with technical folks is hear what the challenges are. Provide some information, ask some good questions of the client so they develop insight. Secondly, go back to them because they're the mover and the decider. Ask them what's sticking with them from the conversation, and then ask them what they're actually going to do. And at the end of the day, in a business, it's what you do that counts.
We've been speaking a lot about learning and discovering and challenging ourselves to do new things, but a huge part of adopting AI is also unlearning and letting go of the way we've done things in the past. So what has been your experience working with clients, and what are your insights on, this idea and concept of unlearning things?
It ain't easy for any of us. There is a great country song about old habits. Old habits like you are hard to break, which is quite true. And in this case, I would say that we've learned a lot about why unlearning and relearning are important from Adam Grant is someone I'm sure that all the coaches know of. And he's done a lot of work and research in that area. And so hopefully we've made enough of a point about how different the world of AI is and is becoming from the prior world. And so the habits that we've had are no longer viable. And that if you look at the habits that drive an organization, enable you to make products and services that people want and that they'll go get and purchase. There's the habits that you do, the business process habits that you create that help you move from an idea to a product that you get. There are the teams that you put together and do a lot of work to get to work together so they coordinate, collaborate, and provide the different skills and interests and talents to create the product. You have to learn what the new business processes are, understand how it drives your business, satisfies your customers, meets their needs and interests and aspirations. And you have to learn about your team, and Wai's touched on this before, you need a different kind of technologist and a different kind of leader to be participants on these teams that are driving this AI generated or facilitated business. What you have to do then is do the hard work of letting go of some of what you know worked before. So you now are learning some new habits that will work in the new context and conditions of the work in the company you're in or the organization you're in and the business climate that you're in that is way, way more customer centric and customer driven than ever before. That's not easy. It's not simple. It's doable. But that's really the short answer to that question. Emily, that give you enough to work with?
Yeah, definitely. And I think my follow-up kind of has two parts of what some of the pushback you're seeing and what are the risks that people are really conscious of. That's probably part of any resistance that's coming up.
Before we go to pushback, let me just add with some vividness, because I mentioned agents in the beginning. These agents are going to transform teams, and we're beginning to see it. It'll be interesting to see how this unfolds in the near future. What this gets into is our conception of what is our team that we work with. Literally, these are physical bodies, right? But what happens when the composition of your team is routinely including, for example, a marketing agent? Is including, for example, a coaching agent. And then you conceptualize, what are the resources that I need? Well, I need one person, based here in Silicon Valley at headquarters. I need a couple people in Boise, Idaho, lower costs, but still very capable. And I need a couple people in India that I'm outsourced to. But actually, I also need these agents. And that you think about them as part of your team from the get-go. Here's a big caveat to Patrick's point. Things are moving so fast, it's hard to predict even the near future, let's say 3 years out. Because right now, we are limited in these AI agents having memory, because memory is very costly from an energy standpoint. These LLMs are very costly to run. So right now we do one search, but it doesn't remember us from the past. And if you think about any interactions we have with people, that memory really serves us in how quickly we come together and advance on our collaboration in our project. So right now, these agents are limited in that it doesn't have a lot of memory. It's kind of one shot. Depending on how this technology advances and the cost of this, we might need to unlearn how we think about teams and then learn again how we lead teams with agents.
If I could just share a very recent personal example. I flew across the country recently, and somehow my TSA pre-number was not on my ticket, so I wanted to make sure I got through security well. It didn't work by texting, so I actually had to call the airline. And I realized after a while that Arturo, that I was speaking with, was an agent who was dealing with customer service for the airline. And even though I knew all about it, knowing that I was having this conversation was a bit disquieting. I was not talking to a real person. I was talking to someone who was trained to be helpful, but it was different. That was like, I had a wow moment.
And I think that speaks a little to the fact, I hear a lot in our internal IOC conversations with coaches, the worry of being replaced. I think that speaks to there still is an inherent value in human to human interaction. These are just tools to help support the team and the work that everyone is doing, whether it's a coach or clients we're working with.
Yeah, on that regard, it's really about the coaching mindset that we have. So if we think that we are going to be replaced, like even the example I gave was a marketing agent, a coaching agent. Some things are going to be at the tip of the fingertips of our client leaders. Why should they turn to a coaching outfit like BetterUp? But again, I go back to the example of LLM plus researcher. This is someone who, they came out of, let's say, like at some point I was coaching a general counsel, and she said to me, I come out of law school, and it was helpful to have some of that background, but in the real world, I had a lot to learn. Our client leaders and we ourselves will have at our fingertips this researcher who can go into this mega library and prompt it in order to get certain outputs for us. But there's still so much that we need to do with that kind of unstructured data, so to speak, and then actually make it intelligible to us to then make good decisions with it. So there's still a lot that needs to be done, but we can use LLMs to assist us. Our client leaders are already doing it, and we ourselves as coaches can do it. And that will speed and also increase the quality and probably widen the diversity of our angles that we're looking at issues. And the coaches that are going to succeed in the future are the ones that are going to get really good at this.
It sounds like it still takes the skill of the person or the coach using it and their discernment too. It's like training any other person on your team. So you have to train the agent, and it takes your skill and expertise and background to train it to operate the way you need it to.
Yep.
That's my sense of it.
This also speaks to kind of the concerns within workforces of, what's going to be happening to individuals' roles as this environment is changing. And as we've been talking about, coaches have that same concern. The technology is changing. So where is my role going to be? What is my job going to be looking like in the near future? So I think that brings up kind of this conversation of reskilling or upskilling individuals to be adaptive with the technological landscape. What have you seen to be effective, or what could leaders and coaches be considering when it comes to reskilling and upskilling? What type of mindset?
Well, Austin, I think you just said it. You actually have the mindset that I need to reskill and upskill, right? And then, so what does that mean in real time? Wai and I attended a conference on AI at UC Berkeley back in late last year. And there was a really interesting presentation by a large insurance, I think it was an insurance company, where they were actively involved with seeing where the business was going, seeing what the customer expectations were doing. And they were actively involved in retraining a significant part of their workforce to familiarize themselves with AI, familiarize themselves to learn, to educate, to work with others, to learn from them. So both they could do that for themselves within their own organization, and then also be more able-bodied in serving their customers. If you don't do that, you're in trouble. You didn't say it, Austin, but there is a concern for some people, like, well, with what I know now, is my job going to be around anymore? And the answer is, I think that there will be some jobs, just like I referenced Arturo, who helped me make my recent airplane reservation, that used to be done by a customer agent, right? A person agent. Some jobs like that will go away. However, there will be new jobs because there's new work to be done. And those who take the initiative or work for organizations that see the future and are training and educating people will be the winners, will be the survivors, will be those who prosper. Those who refuse to accept that things are going to be different will have trouble. So I think that's a real fundamental question, both for individuals and for organizations to tackle. It's an ethical issue. Most of the time, that's what's needed. To have an appetite for learning, I think, is critical to success in the future.
That's awesome. And it's tied to a question I just want to call out again that we didn't directly speak about before, of, what's some of the pushback and the risks, because I think this is tied into, getting the buy-in from employees and for different leaders to consider when they are training and reskilling and upskilling their employees.
There's also a lot, about the losing my job, but then finding new ways to train myself and learn to get a new job or a job for the future. There's also the concern, AI uses a tremendous amount of electricity, has a high need for computer chips, and uses a lot of water. So people are very concerned about the potential environment impacts. So organizations will have to figure out how to do that, how to satisfy the needs and interests of keeping the environment clean. One of the other things that we've touched on indirectly, which is also, Wai's touched on this in a nice way, but there's also a concept of digital hallucinations. And what that means is that even if you've put really good data in as best as you can into your artificial intelligence, you still need to have people who are expert and informed in that area to look at the output and say, is this good? Is this well researched? Is this quality? You have to train the artificial intelligence tools to get better and better at processing the information. But at inception, and I guess forever, you'll still need people who are experts in that arena to look at it and say, is this good? Do they have the ability to discern? And so you can't just call in anyone to do that. Another thing that Wai and I heard at this conference that was really fascinating, and I've heard about since, is the issue of data privacy. That is a big concern with all of us these days. Certainly it's been more of a concern in the United States of America in the recent past, as well as globally. But there's two levels of it in a way, which is one, how do we keep the data inside our organization safe? And then also, how do we keep our customers' information safe? And a signature moment for me, this was before artificial intelligence. I was doing work a number of years ago with a company in Washington, D.C. that managed technical security for the United States. The FBI, they monitored traffic from Iran and Iraq and stuff like that. I was sitting with a bunch of the folks, all who've been ex-military or TSA. And one guy looks at me and he says, you do know that no matter how good a job you do with security, there's somebody who's going to be pushing that forward and trying to break into your system. And he looked at me. It was a very significant moment of sobriety for me. So it's more of an issue now as we move into more sophisticated technology and information, I'm going to call it outreach, through the use of AI.
Yeah, I would just want to clarify one thing, help people reduce some of the fear. Using AI is not about applying math. There is a computer scientist who's has been working through with mathematics and statistics, and then come out with that LLM. But it's not dissimilar to, for example, our use of our cell phones. whether an iPhone or an Android or Samsung or whatever. We don't need to be the computer scientists of software or hardware in order to use our cell phone. And we're all using too much of that, right? So similarly with LLMs, we can use our natural language. The outputs are in natural language. It's actually one of the great advances. And there's lots to do with it. So I would say just like begin by playing with it and then start, thinking about, oh, how can I apply this in my work? And that's how we begin to add value in our workplaces. That's from an individual level. That's slightly different from as a coach. But as a coach, how would I use it? And that's also slightly different than, remember, Patrick and I, our specialty is actually working with leaders who have been called upon to lead their organizations in transforming with AI. So they're encountering then some different issues around, in particular, acceptance, adoption. And so I always go to, once we start being in it, then you're actually in transforming. You're not being transformed you're not being washed over by that tidal wave. You're already wading into the water, starting to play with it. It has a very different feeling.
Wonderful. This is a great place for us to wrap up on. Great point. Of everything we talked about, I'm just wondering what are the takeaways that you want the people listening into to walk away with, or generally, what are both of your takeaways for us to wrap up on?
I got 3 biggies. 1, be open to change. Be ready to change yourself and your situation and who you're with. Why said this before, but I would say to get comfortable in the world of AI, practice, explore, experiment, learn. If you don't get your hands on it, you won't learn. And so you have to play, have fun, learn, be willing to make mistakes, pick yourself back up and do it again. And the other thing I don't think we've touched on significantly yet is that I think it's significant is to partner with others, work with others, work in concert with others, because the experience that I have will be somewhat different than what Y has had. And if I'm working with him and doing some things with him or with anyone else, I'm going to pick up some things from what he's learned that's going to help me. So I think there's a real sort of with others learning environment and opportunity that we have to really pay attention to.
Yeah, I picked up on that last theme, better together. So it's just more fun, and you can kind of keep going. And as I said earlier, that Patrick's a running partner, even though he and I both have been coaching. Actually, my very first client at Google was a scientist who was focused on learning about human emotions, but he was dealing with his own team who had lots of emotions. And so I was his executive coach, even though that was his specialty. He was a PhD level computer scientist. I'm saying this because even though Patrick and I have been exposed to this for some time, we actually took all of 2024 to learn more about AI and how it's impacting our profession and our leaders. And it's just so much more fun to hang out with your friend and learn about something together. And so don't make this so big that, and you're like, doing it alone. If it's interesting and exciting, better together.
Yeah, I love that forward movement so much. It's fantastic. And it's great to get to meet with you both and talk about this subject and see, how our coach is interacting in the business space of artificial intelligence and what is next for our profession and how we can be upskilling and working together to figure out this new technology space.
And may I just also say thank you to both of you. It really has been a delight to work with you and chat with you and explore and experiment. You made it very easy for us to speak in a forthright manner and to hopefully share with others some of the things we've learned. So thank you for creating the opportunity, and hopefully a lot of people will be able to listen in and take away a few tips.
Is there any way, Patrick and Wai, that people can get in contact with you or learn more about your endeavors into this space?
So you can find me at Patrick, Patrick, in the traditional way, at Resources in Action, ResourcesinAction.com. Was that clear? Got to keep the S in there, otherwise it won't get to me. And why? How about you?
Well, the good news is that I'm a very unique name. Wai is the first name, and the last name is Poc. So easiest way, search for me. But I'm also at Wai@unleashedleaders.com. And so it's Unleashed Leaders. It's all one word. Unleashed is with an ED, and Leaders is a plural with an S. So yeah, come and find us, and we would welcome you to the world of coaching leaders who are transforming their organizations with AI.
Wonderful. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
And thank you for everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Coaching Revealed.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Coaching Revealed, brought to you by the Institute of Coaching. You can learn more about the Institute on our website at instituteofcoaching.org. You can stay up to date with new episodes of our podcast by liking and following Coaching Revealed. You can also find us on social media on LinkedIn, Instagram, and X with the handle Institute of Coaching. We also love hearing from our guests, so please reach out to us with thoughts you have on this episode and any questions you have about coaching. Until next time, this is Emily Terrani with Coaching Revealed.